Professor Lyle from um, Brown University and Defense Priorities. Thank you very much for coming. And also, Miss Lina Benabdallah will become a discussion in our panelists tonight. So I think we have very diverse background, but mostly we are keen on talking about the geopolitical rivalry between U.S. China and how Indonesia, because the title of this webinar is 100 days. I think now already 160 days, yeah, already of Prabowo foreign policy and how the Prabowo will navigating in the global politics and geopolitics in Asia Pacific and in global, because we know that Pak Prabowo he has military background, who has many aspiration, ambition to lead Indonesia. As many Indonesian diplomats say, Indonesia is aim for the middle power, yeah, in this region. So let's see whether this will become realized within 5 or 10 years. Let's see, because for the last 57 years, Indonesia is always considered ASEAN as their cornerstone of the foreign policy. But now it seems a little bit shifting, because we know that for the first visit outside is to China and to US and Chile and Argentina. But only on the way to return to Indonesia, Pak Prabowo is only visit Malaysia. But until now, he haven't visit other countries in South Asia. So there's a little bit shift of his approach, his agenda with his foreign policies. I think this is very good moment for us, for all the speaker to speak up and to share their knowledge, share their insight on how the Prabowo navigating in this geopolitical rivalry. I think without further ado, I think I would like to invite Mr. Broto, as you are become the first speaker to present his view and for 10 minutes. Welcome, Mr. Broto. Please, the time is yours. The floor is yours. Please.
Thank you, Pak Benny. I just prepare a slide basically to help me to focus on what I think it is important to be discussed this evening, Jakarta time. I don't know, maybe it's early morning in the US. So there's only 4 things that I want to talk with you basically. When we talk about the Indonesian foreign policy, especially Pak Prabowo's foreign policy and China assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific area. I don't know whether the term assertive is a correct term, basically. I think it is more than just assertive approach that they did in the past few years. But let us focus on Indonesia. First, when we talk about the Indonesian foreign policy, it's also including Pak Prabowo's foreign policy, we have to keep in mind that Indonesia has their core values, and then there's also additional values added by Pak Prabowo during his term, and then the implementation of that values. First, we have the Indonesian free and active principle, or we call it bebas aktif, which is basically a very norm-based ideas on how we should conduct our foreign relations. In the past, it might work really well during the Cold War, but now there have been questions about the relevance of free and active foreign policy principles, not only abroad, but also in Indonesia. So now the younger scholar in Indonesia are taking or talk about a more pragmatic approach or pragmatic interpretation of this free and active foreign policy. In addition, Prabowo also mentioned about good neighborhood policy, but as far as today, as of today, I haven't heard any details on this good neighborhood policy. What it mean? So who will be the focus of this policy, and so on and so forth. But from what Prabowo did in the first few months during his term, we learned that he already visited China twice, and then he also visited the US as part of his China's visit, the second visit to China. And then somehow, suddenly, Indonesia decided to join BRICS. In a way, it sends a mixed signal to our friends abroad. because when we talk about BRICS, we have to put this, how you call it, institutional arrangement as a gesture of anti-Western global security arrangement. But I don't know whether we are going to take the same approach as the other members of BRICS, especially China and also Russia, because I think for Indonesia, joining BRICS does not mean that we are anti the West, but it's more suggesting that we are different from the West, which is basically the term will be the non-Western approach that we take within the BRICS. And then we also talk about the global south, but I'm not really sure if we can consider Russia as the part of the global south. Maybe we can consider China as part of it, but Russia will be an issue for us if we also include them as part of the global south. That is the first thing. And the second issues is basically when we talk about the Indo-Pacific and geopolitical rivalry, we will talk about the US-China rivalry in Pacific Asia and Asia Pacific. And there's always a question of when Indonesia will choose side between the US and China. And now with BRICS, it's mean China or Russia. Indonesia adopted a hedging strategy instead of balancing and bandwagoning. And they conducted this strategy through multilateral institution, basically. This is something that we always avoid in Indonesia when we talk about the need to take sides. But eventually, to certain point, to one point, we really need to consider which side are we going to jump in or to join. And the third issues, when we talk about geopolitical rivalry in Asia Pacific, uh, I so far haven't heard anything related to the national interest of Indonesia. It's easier said than done. We always mention that we supported world peace. We want to have stable region as a precondition for our national development. But what does it mean with stable region? We until today haven't managed to divide it, whether stable regions mean the US and China rivalry will be calmly managed, and if it is so, then who will be the one who so in charge of this making this calm situation in the Asia Pacific region? One thing that I want us to keep in mind is basically we have an issues of protection of Indonesian living abroad. In particular, when we talk about the 300,000 Indonesian who currently residing in Taiwan, what will we do when there is an armed conflict between China and also Taiwan, or even between China and the US? We need to really figure it out how to solve these issues. What mechanism or what scheme are we going to implement when this happens? And then we also talk about economic interests, which is this is I think one of the reason why we have such a good relation with China, despite of all of their quote unquote assertiveness in Asia Pacific. Uh, but I think we need to search for it's not substitute, but alternative partners, whether we're going to work with Middle Eastern countries, for example, boosting the investment in Indonesia, and so on and so forth. Because I think if we heavily relied on China in the future, it will also jeopardize our economy, and of course, it will also jeopardize our own survival. So my thought on this, my suggestion is basically we Indonesia and Pak Prabowo's government need to extend the room of maneuvering. We need to have flexibility in our foreign policy. And to certain degree, it means that we have to redefine uh, our usual policies. For example, when we talk about one China policy, because there are different interpretation of one China policy based on one China principle with different multiple interpretation. we need to provide bigger room for maneuvering because obviously we need to protect Indonesian who currently living in Taiwan. And then I think it is also important because Pak Benny also mentioned about ASEAN. We do need to have a stronger voice on South China Sea issues. We always mention that ASEAN is our core instrument in foreign policy. It is the main areas that we're going to extend our leverage, our influence. But on the issue of South China Sea, I don't think we have done enough. I think we need to really take side with our friends in Southeast Asia and implement a sort of collective action, which is institutional approach, basically to deal with China's assertiveness. I don't have any intention to place our foreign policy within the rivalry between the US and also China, but in the certain term or certain period, I think we really need to pay attention to what China did, or I believe they will continue doing it in our region in Southeast Asia, particularly in the South China Sea. So I think that is the 4 points that I want to discuss with all of you, and I'm looking forward to hear from you. I will stop here, Pak Benny, so we have more time for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mas Broto Wardoyo, for your insightful presentation. And I think there's a lot of questions will be addressed to you, hopefully from the audience and also from the Miss Lina Abdullah for discussion. I think I would like to invite my colleague, my close friend, Pak Yudha. Are you here because you are the moderator?
Yeah. Thank you for being. I'm sorry. Yeah,
The
many.
problem? Are you already fixed the problem? Okay, please.
Yeah.
You can lead the discussion, please.
Sure. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I'm sorry for my late. Yeah, I have a problem with the apps of Zoom, so I have to try to reinstalling the application. So now I'm using my phone. So I'm sorry if I'm pretty late. Yeah, to join to this forum. So hi. So maybe I hear a little from Pak Broto Wardoyo, yeah, when we have to redefine our concept of foreign policy and how we approach the geopolitical challenge. So, but if we look up into the annual speech of Minister of Foreign Affairs that 2025, we address for 4 issues actually, and then they were emphasizing on the how we achieve the regional stability by to support the ASEAN effort to to what do you call it, to establish the code of conduct of South China Sea, and how Indonesia views on the maritime stability and maritime security. So is it for you, this is it not clear enough, or maybe we have to create some or make it clear what is maritime stability is, or what is the strategy of how to support the code of conduct.
So that is a question for me, right, Mas Yuda?
Yeah.
No, but when we talk about South China Sea, we talk about maritime security. We have to acknowledge that members of ASEAN has different perception of threat. In Indonesia, I don't know why we rarely consider China as a threat. Their activities in the South China Sea, we never consider that as a threat. We only consider their activities in the North Natuna Sea as a threat, basically. I don't know why we do not stay together with the Philippines, for example. Why we do not take side with the other ASEAN members when they do have problems with China in the South China Sea. What is the point then? We have ASEAN, and we always mention ASEAN as our core instrument of foreign policy. Our focus is always on ASEAN. But on my own opinion, I don't think we have done enough. Yes, we talk about COC. But I think discussion on these issues has been for years, right? It's begun when I was still a student in the 1990s. We already talk about it, and now we still talk about it. So on my personal opinion is, I don't think we really serious talking about this, knowing that China will, to certain degree, put pressure on us, on Indonesia. Maybe not diplomatically or politically, but economically, they definitely will do that. So that is my take, Pak Yudha.
Okay. That was interesting, because we have seen that there were stagnations, right, in talk with the COC, but we also see that there's a hope actually by Asians, by ASEAN. I mean ASEAN will be the vehicle of Indonesia to break through the stagnations, to what we call to enhance the communications among actors, and how and find a solutions for the code of conduct. What do you think about ASEAN as a vehicle, Pak Broto?
Uh, the problem with ASEAN is because we, well, not all of us, but some of us really succumb to Chinese pressure, right? So it will be difficult basically. But I think as the so-called leader of ASEAN, we need to take bold action. That's something that somehow in the past, during Pak Harto, we decided to do so, but now I'm not really sure that we are taking the role of leadership in ASEAN in that sense. Yeah.
All right, so interesting. But however, it's not just a geopolitical challenge actually, but we also address what we call it diplomacy of economic diplomacy. How do you see it, Pak Broto, about economic diplomacy, investment, and etc.? Is there? I
Yeah.
think when we joined the BRICS, I think this is all about the market, right? The new market, or we try to kind of have a market diversifications. What do you think about it, Pak Broto?
I agree with that. Definitely, we need China for our economy, but to what degree, basically, to what point are we going to really have our dependency to China? Why don't we diversify our sources of investment, for example? We have a good relationship with the Arab countries, the Middle Eastern countries. Why don't we capitalize our relationship with them? And now with Pak Prabowo have the Pak Anies Mata as Vice Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs, I think it could be he could lead a more focused approach to the Middle Eastern countries. Well, of course, with few prerequisites. But I think the idea is basically to diversify our source of funding, our source of investment. And yeah, I'm not really sure if we always rely on China, whether it's a good thing, basically. I mean, we have examples around the world about that. So why we insist of keeping our, well, we should have good relationship with them, but we have to maintain our independence. That is my take, basically.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
But it's make me like a haters.
Okay. Not really. Okay. Thank you, Pak Broto. I think I should invite some of panelists over here, because I see in the flyer we have Professor Lyle Goldstein, Professor Lina Benabdallah, and then Professor James Wan. Maybe uh, uh, maybe I will start with Professor Goldstein. Maybe Professor, maybe you have any thought or insight about the 100 foreign policy of Prabowo, or you have an insight from our conversations before. Please, Professor Goldstein.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I can make some remarks. Let me say, I'm really thrilled to participate in this discussion, and I'm already learning a lot. I myself am mostly focusing on China, and I also do a lot of work on Russia as well. At the moment, I'm publishing a book on China-Russia relations that will be out next year. But I do try to do some work on Southeast Asia as well. And I was fortunate to visit Manila recently, uh, and I worked for the Navy, the U.S. Navy for 20 years. So I was often assigned to work on the South China Sea issue. So uh, I can try to help in some ways there. Um, I am. I'm proud a little bit to be involved in the current negotiations about the Ukraine war as well. So we can talk about some of the details there, but I feel strongly that I'm glad that the U.S. president is focusing very hard on trying to get a peace agreement. As for China, I will say just a couple of comments. As I said, I worked for the Navy, so I'm very interested in China's naval development. I do think this is a challenge for Southeast Asian states. Uh, we see China developing a new frigate, the 054B, and a new kind of landing ship type 076. So there's a lot to talk about in terms of Chinese naval development and maritime security. We also observed the recent deployment of the Chinese Navy into the waters close to Australia, and this caused a very big, let's say, media excitement. Although I personally, I don't see this as a terribly big development. I will say, and here I will just draw briefly from my experience in looking at the Ukraine war, that I must say, I think that the idea of neutrality is a good one. I think this has a very strong basis in Jakarta, and a lot of countries look up to Indonesia as a leader in this in that kind of path of neutrality, let's say. And my view is that this is often wise for countries, maybe particularly for middle powers. I understand that's a very controversial point of view, and in my country, it's also controversial. But I do think that a country like Indonesia is very wise to maintain that position. And I think my observation is that Indonesia is quite good at this. That is, they have done it for a long time, and they understand that they need to get along with both China and the United States, and also as the previous professor was saying, to cultivate friends in other areas as well. I guess many people are. I'll just say I do think the South China Sea is intensifying in its dangers. I don't really view it as stable. I think China's capabilities are growing. I believe Philippines is caught up in a very dicey situation. By dicey, I mean very risky. I think I'm quite concerned about what could happen to the Philippines in this situation, and I think there's escalation on both sides. We've seen the deployment of U.S. Typhoon missiles into Philippines, but a lot of various U.S. forces have gone into Philippines, rotating through in the last couple of years, and I see a kind of dangerous escalation dynamic. For Indonesia, I'm also concerned about, well, one more thing on Taiwan. I will say that situation is very, very dark indeed. A lot of people fear a war could break out in the next 2 or 3 years. I'm afraid I do agree with that. I think the chances are way too high. I would like to see more caution. One idea I would like to leave this group with is you must understand there is a tight connection, a tight linkage between the South China Sea issue and the Taiwan issue. If you don't agree, I invite you to look at a map very closely, and you'll see that the area disputed between China and the Philippines would be very strategically significant in a Taiwan situation. So I'm very concerned that the escalation of the Taiwan issue is fostering. There's my timer telling me I'd better wind up, but I guess a final thought, just a parting thought here, is that we have a lot of questions about Trump and his foreign policy. Many Americans are unnerved, are downright scared. A lot of American foreign policy seems to be in the process of a major transition. I must say I'm a little bit, let's say I am concerned, but I'm a little. There are some positive signs, as I said. I think I'm glad to see our president looking for a way to find peace in Ukraine. I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago in Washington where a very wise expert said, the way to understand Trump, here's the primary question on Trump's foreign policy. We're definitely seeing a kind of realism, the resurgence of realism in U.S. foreign policy. So we might talk about what is realism, how might it apply to Southeast Asia. What kind of realism, though? He said there are two kinds. One kind is a kind of balance of power. That is, if China is being more assertive, then the U.S. will balance. But another kind of realism is a more kind of what might be termed spheres of influence realism. And so this, I won't name names, but this very esteemed American foreign policy hand said, we don't quite know which brand of realism that Trump will choose, balance of power or spheres of influence, but it makes a huge difference for the future of security in East Asia, Southeast Asia in particular. Well, thank you very much for having me, and I look forward to more discussion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Goldstein. So I have kind of a note about how close situation in Philippines and the Taiwan, because if you see the map, we have seen very clearly about the geographic proximity. Maybe I forgot, but I'm sure that I'm right about the geometric strategy, right? Because the possibility to what do you call it, to have to flanking the Taiwan from the Philippines. So that's a good possible also. So I think I will go through to the Professor James Wan. So Professor, what do you thought about the foreign policy and the situations in the Asia actually? Please have your time.
Okay. Thank you, Broto, and Dr. Kurniawan, and also Dr. Goldstein and the distinguished guest. Great to have you to be with you and to share my views. And I had the honor to meet Broto recent years ago, and in NCCU, and that is one of the many Indonesian students or populations in Taiwan. I would just simply explain uh, uh, why Indonesia matter to Taiwan, because it is the largest foreign group in terms of the numbers in Taiwan. So Broto, you put 300,000. I'll probably say more exactly 350,000. So that's is by far the largest foreign group of populations in Taiwan. And we have many Americans, we have many Vietnamese migrant workers, Filipinos, but by far Indonesia. So when the new president was elected, I still remember during the election day, that was January last year, early last year, a bit of more than a year ago, when I saw my on TV, Indonesian people can vote for their president in Taipei, in Taiwan. I immediately send those TV report links to my Indonesian students, and by saying that I am jealous. I'm jealous to you because we do not have the opportunity. If we are not in Taiwan, then we cannot vote. While you guys in Indonesia, in Taipei, you are still able to vote for your president. So that shows the democracy. Okay. Second, how does the Indonesia matter to Taiwan? In terms of the numbers, I just take my own example. As I have taught many, Broto is one of them, Ayu, she's also teaching in one of the Indonesia's very good universities after she received her master degrees. And also my mother, because most of the Indonesian migrant workers working in Taiwan in the in care homes, and my mother is now in care home, and she's looked after by Indonesian caretakers. So in case of there is a conflict between China and Taiwan, if I am not the first one to be affected, then my mother will be the first one to be affected. Why? Because this 350,000 migrant workers will need to leave. Well, if they are unwilling to leave, I think Indonesia government will have the contingency plan to evacuate them. This in case of this kind of scenarios, and it was announced I think about 1.5 or 2 years ago that Indonesia has such contingency plan. And I'm not sure if this evening we have Malaysia guest. I'm not sure. I'm just taking another example. I met a very senior Malaysia's diplomat in Taipei about a little bit more than a year ago. First time we met in a nice Turkish restaurant, and we talked. And I think as a diplomat, the number one job is to promote bilateral diplomatic relations, even though unofficial, but still. And he was very honest. The first question he asked me, "Hey, Professor Yuan or Colonel Yuan, sorry, because I served in Taiwan's military for almost 30 years, and then retired as a retired colonel." And he said, "Can you tell me where is the best sea harbor or seaport for evacuation plan if Malaysia government has such plan to evacuate Malaysian citizens currently residing or living or working in Taiwan?" So I just first question, my first response to him is, "Oh, you are very honest." So I think some places near the south geographically the same, and transportation, traffic, roads, or need to be considered. So that shows countries has their own considerations in terms of the when they faces the China-Taiwan issues. So that is why I think the new foreign policy of Indonesia will have something to do with Taiwan, and I would like to share my perspective. And Dr. Goldstein, you just mentioned that the naval modernization or expansion of the PLA Navy, and I think you mentioned Type 54, if I remember right, because I had the chance to get on board of Type 54 in London while I was defense attaché based in London. So I can tell you that that is one of the ship which changed the current status of Taiwan Strait. Why? Because after August 2022, the center line of the Taiwan Strait was wiped out or erased by China. And ever since then, I think on that particular day, I think the next day when the then Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, visited Taiwan, I think the next day, China launched the military exercise. And then one of the ships they sent to surround Taiwan was Type 54. So I vividly remember that, and also the commander of that flotilla conducting the exercise was the commander of the flotilla visiting London when I boarded on Type 54 in 2017. So that shows from the Eastern Theater Command. So that shows the China has been significantly modernizing. It's not only modernizing its naval fleet and also shipbuilding capabilities, but also technologies. At the same time, they have tightened up the pressure to Taiwan. So nowadays, every day we have dozens of ships or a few dozens of aircraft, if you call it patrolling or harassing near Taiwan's airspace and Taiwanese territorial water, or might not be territorial water, near the continuous zone. So that shows a change of the status quo ever since 2022. So that is the current pressure, and that pressure will result in sorry.
Please continue.
Okay.
Someone open the mic, so please continue, Mr. Yuan.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. That will result in the countries in the for example, the Philippines or Indonesia or Southeast Asian countries to reconsider, because China has conducted a lot of pressure in the South China Sea. So Dr. Goldstein also mentioned the likelihood of potential conflict between two sides of Taiwan Strait gets higher in the next few years. I think I kind of agree, because there are several factors for us to consider. Number one is deteriorated cross-strait relations, and I think not having dialogue is one of the key factors that the both sides, because not to have a chance to talk, then to create a higher chance of conflict. So I think Benny and I met one of our common friends from China, a president of a think tank based in Beijing, and I think last year, remember Benny, we met him in NDTN. He told me, because we met, that was the third time I met him, and actually we got along, even though he has a PLA Navy captain background. So we can talk. We just like common friends by avoiding talking about the CCP, that kind of things. I think generally we can get we managed to get along. Nevertheless, he said, 老袁, that means old Yuan, my surname. That's a typical way to call a friend in the Chinese or Taiwanese typical way. He said, 老袁, old Yuan, I really think Xi Jinping really wants to attack Taiwan. He didn't say that when we met first time. He didn't say that when we met the second time. He did say that when we met last year, October, in Malacca. So because that's very private, so I would take that as a signal. Second, current administration, I think, also has to play some roles. I guess my own opinion is that the issue of independence has always been held by the Chinese government. That this is can never be given up when if Taiwan is seeking independence or trying to use several ways towards that direction. So that is why China is squeezing, is now pressurizing so hardly on Taiwan. So I guess that when we think back, Taiwan can manage to have a relatively good relations within those 8 years, 2008 to 2016, and then 2016 to 2024. That was also a kind of a okay time because the government was still, I would say, I will use the word predictable. Then my opinion is that current Taiwanese government should manage a way to have a dialogue at the same time to strengthen the defense capabilities. Because if both sides are not talking, then the chance to have a skirmishes or a potential conflict will become higher, and then that would cost Indonesian hundreds of thousands of Indonesians in Taiwan a big trouble, and also the foreign relations. So so that is my concern, and how does that matter to the Indonesia? So I agree with Dr. Goldstein and also Mr. Broto's several points in terms of the South China Sea issue. South China Sea issue is definitely one of the biggest issue because Taiwan used to be holding the largest natural island, Ituaba or Taiping Island in the South China Sea. But ever since 2013 or 14, it is no longer the largest natural island. It is you see the Fiery Cross, the huge, much militarized equipments or capabilities installed by the Chinese, and then you would think that they are seriously militarized that region, and so that would show a huge concern to the regional stakeholders. I will stop here. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Yuan. So yeah, quite interesting about the how you tell us about the Xi Jinping positions on the Taiwan, because I think you are really sure that Xi Jinping will campaign will do the military campaign to Taiwan, right? Because maybe I read about the news about the what they call it, Shu Kiao, about the deployment of Shu Kiao, a bridge that already prepared by China to create a big ship and the bridge. Maybe that was a kind of indication. Is that true? Yeah, I think that is one concern of Indonesian foreign policy, because when we read about the annual speech of our foreign minister, one of the concern is the protections of our citizens. in the domestic order growth. So maybe this is the important point for the foreign policy of Indonesia. So, okay, thank you, Professor Yuan, for your thought and the insight. And then maybe I will invite Prof. Lina Benabdallah if you have some questions or or concern or something to ask to the panelists, to Pak Broto, to Professor Yuan or Professor Goldstein. Please.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you to the panelists for all these very insightful comments, and also the different perspectives we heard through these interventions. And so I'm very grateful to Benny for inviting me to participate in this, and grateful to the panelists for their insights. So I want to say that I come to this from, as I mentioned earlier, as I introduced myself, more or less really focused on what China's foreign policy is looking like, especially in the continent of Africa and the global south more generally. And in this space, right, more and more in the last few years, we are seeing this move towards what a lot of scholars are calling sort of this multipolarity, this concept that several actors and players are becoming extremely important in various regions, rather than focusing on one or two kind of or regional even hegemons in that sense. Indonesia had also become a big and important player in Africa. As we recall, there was the summit that was hosted just last year in Bali. There was as well, since Indonesia's sort of formal intention on joining the BRICS, this has also given it a higher profile. It has given it a bigger role and to play. So in many ways, it's really interesting for me to observe sort of these areas in which Indonesia and China are kind of these areas of cooperation, but also there's areas of competition, because Indonesia is competing as well with China for influence in Africa, for example. So Indonesia is not just collaborating, or is not just kind of thinking about China as this kind of potential, cooperation potentially partner or rival in the region, but also elsewhere. It's also outside of South Asia. It's also outside of East Asia. It's also going this competition and this collaboration kind of is manifesting itself in other areas, such as in the continent of Africa, as I mentioned. And so with that in mind, I think it is for me very interesting to note, for example, that we haven't really talked about critical minerals. We haven't talked about natural resources. We haven't talked about sort of the role of these resources in the big scheme of the kind of the China-Indonesia relations, but also U.S.-China relations, how it's manifesting in other places, especially in the global south. And so I would like to, if possible, put this on the table and ask our panelists or moderator if they have any thoughts to kind of comment on sort of what they think the next few years are bringing in terms of China-Indonesia ties in relation to these critical minerals. And of course, maybe to Professor Goldstein, if that's something that he is willing to comment on, how that factors into U.S. foreign policy kind of moving forward, and how does Indonesia play in U.S. calculations about sort of critical minerals in the next few years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Benabdallah. So I will start with the question number one, and I think Pak Broto will proper to answer the questions. Please have your time, Pak Broto, to answer the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Pak Yudha. When we establish our relation with China in developing our natural resources, nickel in particular, we have high hopes basically at that time. But now, after a few years, some of scholars in Indonesia have done research on the negative impact of the natural resources management in Indonesia. I'm not only talking about the how you call it, the disparities, the economic disparities in those places where we have natural resources in Indonesia, but more importantly is we do have issues of environmental pressures. That is the first thing. And then there was also issues of social pressures in those areas, especially in the areas of northern Moluccas and also a few areas in the Celebes Island. So I don't know if in the futures we should maintain that kind of relationship that we have. In addition, we also have a lot of issues related with corruption in the development of natural resources in Indonesia with China. So on my own perspective, yes, we do need China to help us to use these minerals, but I don't think it is a good way in the future. So I think we need to really shift our attention, not only talking about the extractive industries in Indonesia when we talk with China. So I think that is my take, but I will be happy to share with you because some of my colleagues in my university, they did research on these issues. And it's quite an in-depth issue, so I will be more than happy to share it with you. That might take Pak Yudha.
Well, thank you, Pak Broto, for your response. So maybe I'll give a chance to Prof. Goldstein to respond. Please have your time.
Yeah, it's a lot of good, interesting discussion, and I think, yeah, I would agree very much with Lina's point that I think we are on the cusp of a kind of new world order that is emerging now, this kind of multipolarity, and I do think that we really need to think very hard about what, how does world politics work effectively in multipolarity, and how do we prevent conflict and support our other goals, whether it's economic development or protecting the environment. I think those are all crucial, and I'm one who has been very critical of the last 10 years of, say, American foreign policy, and I think part of what I am engaged in, frankly, and my new book that looks at Russia-China relations really grapples with this idea of like, how does the United States work in a multipolar world? And I want to tell you, having been to Washington a few times lately, there's a bit of chaos, frankly, in the American Capitol, because it's like we just don't know how to behave in this world anymore. So thank you, Lina, for bringing that up, and hopefully we can dialogue more on that. Look, on the issue of minerals and kind of economic development, a couple of thoughts are that I mean, clearly the current U.S. president, Donald Trump, he's very focused on this. I think perhaps a little too much. I'm one who thinks, that free markets are quite effective, rather efficient in bringing, resources to market. They find a way, and guess what? International cooperation is a really big part of that. So I don't really think, honestly, that governments need to play that big a role. So I'm a little cautious about some of the statements and ideas that have been voiced lately. In particular, I'll say I must comment on the minerals issue. The focus by President Trump on the minerals agreement with Ukraine, I myself consider it to be a big mistake in so many respects, not least that it will shortchange the Ukrainian people of their natural resources. I think So, if you want to call this a new call it neo-mercantilism as a strain of the new realism in Washington, I'm leery. I don't think that really should be a big part of the new realism. I mean, look, I'm not naive. Resources are incredibly important. Indonesia has immense natural resources. I'm well aware of that. Of course, although, resources are critical minerals are, spread around the world, and we know certain countries, not just Indonesia, but all over the world, the Democratic Republic of Congo, for example, has immense resources, and there's concerns about kind of a new great power scramble for resources. I do think Indonesia has to focus on this, of course. I guess my final comments would be that, look, let's not forget that there are some virtues in globalization. We can learn from other countries. The United States has benefited enormously from world trade, including with the Asia Pacific. I would like to see that continue. I think the United States has gone so far down the road of putting sanctions on countries all over the world, including our friends somehow, but way too many sanctions. I would like to see basically all U.S. sanctions across the board. Yes, even on North Korea and, quote, rogue regimes. I would like to see most of those dropped. I think the world would be a safer place and a more wealthy, prosperous place. And I think for Indonesia, look, I shouldn't comment too much since I need to spend more time there. But my view is that that Indonesia can benefit immensely from China's growing prosperity. Of course, it has to engage with its eyes wide open. And the major difficulty, I think, is on the environmental front and in terms of, technology transfer and things like that. But I think China, my view is they understand that, and they're not simply trying to as it were, steal Indonesian resources. I think they know that China will be better off if Indonesia is better off. So that's my view. So, I think China, I would recommend that Indonesia continue its wide engagement while also pursuing with other partners, for instance, in the Middle East. I think that's a very wise policy, but all kinds of good issues for discussion here, and I'll listen to thoughts of other presenters here.
Well, thank you, Professor Goldstein. Maybe Professor Lina, you have any further concern, further questions?
I think for being conscious of time and audience, maybe we only have about 15 minutes. Maybe we can give them some time to ask questions.
Sure.
I mean, I have a lot of questions, but I don't want to
Okay.
time. Maybe also Professor Yuan, maybe I don't know if he has something to add on the topic we're just discussing, but I just wanted to kind of give him the opportunity to add something if he needed to.
Well, thank you. So I invited another participants to ask to the panelists to have questions. If you think you need to address some issues on our topics today, please. Okay, maybe Pak Benny first. Pak Benny, raise your hand first, and then you can freely to ask the panelists. Please have your time, Pak Benny.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yudha, for this time. I think I would like to address this question to my fellow friend, Mr. Lyle Goldstein and Pak James Yuan. There's a high expectation from our president from Indonesian population, and also I heard there's a lot of very good comment from foreign diplomatic here in Jakarta that they have high expectation from Prabowo. Because Prabowo has many aspirations, he has many ambitions. For Lyle, what do you expect from the bilateral relation between Indonesia and the US? For example, military to military cooperation between Indonesia and the US. Number two, for Mr. Yuan, do you see that's because you see that there are so many Indonesian population there in Taiwan? Do you see that Indonesian government or Indonesian embassy there, or what do you call it? Not embassy, yeah. What do you call it? Indonesian representative have emergency planning on dealing with this issue if it is there's conflict erupt between China and in Taiwan. That's the question, please. Thank you very much, Yudha.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I will first I will go for the Professor Yuan to answer the question because it's kind of a critical questions, right? So please have time.
First of all, I would like to endorse Dr. Goldstein's points on Indonesia should keep engaging with China while at the same time engage with other countries as well. So I think it is important. That is why in my previous comment I stressed that the not having a dialogue is risky. So to answer my good friend Benny's question, and Indonesian government should have a contingency plan because Taiwanese government is now seriously treating the issue of what we call resilience as vital. I just give you an example. Just less than 2 months ago, I was invited to even the Ministry of Health and Welfare is now planning for the shelter in case of conflict or war. While this issue has been ignored in the past few decades, while it is now seriously considered and planned for now. So not just shelter, but also what resilience plan in terms of energy, in terms of food, in terms of communication. While we, as Taiwan has been facing what we call gray zone tactics, China is not using the conventional military or naval forces or air force. Nevertheless, it used ships to, for example, cut the undersea cable. It used civilian boats to harass or to invade or to the Taiwanese coastline. It used all kind of issues which is unconventional while still being able to or kind of able to reach their goal. So for that case, I think while Taiwan has now planning for such contingency plans for our citizens, being the largest country, having so many migrant workers and students and working, living, study in Taiwan, Indonesia should have such plan and well planned in terms divided into what I call NEO, non-military or kind of evacuation scenario, because that is the operation. If that started, I think by international law, countries cannot launch attack while the evacuation of migrant workers or people, foreigners in Taiwan, that they have to be evacuated. So I guess that has been discussed through the diplomatic circle, but also has been discussed by the Taiwanese side. So not just the Ministry of National Defense, but the National Security Council, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also the defense sectors. And also very obvious the case is that even the Ministry of Health and Welfare is now handling or is now in charge of, in case of the contingency, in case of attack, they have to be responsible for building or establish those wartime shelters. So we have to be prepared in order to beef up the resilience. But again, I still have to say that the how to mitigate the what I call freezing cross-strait relations is the fundamental answer in order to it's a fundamental response to how to answer the question. So to answer the question that the why government in the past was able to manage to keep such if not great but at least stable. Right now we are seeing that the situation between two sides quite unstable, and at the same time, after Trump took office, it adds more unpredictable factors. Because people in Taiwan always asking, if there's a war, will American come to help? Will American come to help? That question has been asked for decades. And while the obviously it has been turned back to strategic ambiguity rather than during Joe Biden's time. He said more than 4 to 5 times, I will defend Taiwan. I will defend Taiwan. But now it gets turns back to the strategic ambiguity. So Taiwan has to realize that is why when I talk to my Indonesia friends or friends in ASEAN countries, I told them a couple of times, again, when I was jealous to Indonesia students or people can vote in Taiwan. I'm also kind of jealous that you guys are able to manage to stay in the middle, able to hedge, to talk to both sides. Why Taiwan cannot? So this is one thing that I would like to maybe ask more. Well, in the future, Benny, we can discuss more about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yuan.
Okay, thank you, Professor Yuan, and I will jump to the Professor Goldstein to respond to Benny's questions.
Yes, I might just quickly comment also on Professor Yuan's views and I would just say quickly on the Taiwan issue. I think he's absolutely correct that the most important thing is for the way forward is a kind of to try to unfreeze the cross-strait relationship, to try to get some dialogue going. I think people who look at the details of that will see that there really is are opportunities there, and I think Professor Yuan also mentioned that we had actually pretty good cross-strait relationship during 2008 to 2016, and I would like to see current leaders reflect on that. What was it that they were doing during that period that could improve the cross-strait relationship? So I really welcome his ideas there, and I hope I would like to see people in Washington also supporting that. My view on whether look, we don't know if Trump would support Taiwan in a war. But yes, I think there are some definite signs that he would stand aside, that he would not intervene with the U.S. military, because that would involve a clash between the two superpowers. And indeed, the military situation favors China very dramatically. So, and moreover, China's nuclear arsenal is growing, and Americans are aware of that. And many Americans are, let's say, look at this scenario and say, why would we take such crazy risks to go to war with another nuclear power? After all, with Russia, we have done everything we could to not to get into a direct war with Russia. So I actually think that the U.S. is, although we preserve strategic ambiguity, that we are stepping back from what I think were Biden's excessive comments in saying that he would come to Taiwan's defense. I regard those as mistakes myself. Coming back to Benny's question, about the U.S.-Indonesian relationship, I would just say that I think there's a lot of room for cooperation. I think we were talking about multipolarity before, and to me, this can be a powerful support for this new kind of multipolar world where the United States, yes, we work with our allies like Japan and Philippines, but we also work very closely with friends and partners and rising powers. And clearly, to call Indonesia a middle power, I think probably an understatement even, but surely the United States would benefit. At the same time, within this new multipolarity, as Lina brought our attention to that issue, I think the United States, Washington should welcome the fact that Indonesia has good ties with other countries in the system, like China, and the fact that Indonesia is a member of the BRICS, it should not bother us at all. And in fact, that can support this new multipolar system. I guess a final note here. I mean, I think Indonesia can succeed in kind of playing both sides, if you will, that it can both increase its military capabilities and, if you will, to borrow from the Taiwan discussion, Indonesia can make itself into a porcupine, I think, and is doing so. And I think that's all to the good and would be a kind of caution on China. And yet still pursue a very good diplomatic and economic relationship with China. And indeed, I believe Indonesia could play a crucial role because they have some trust in Beijing. They have a record of cooperation, so that Indonesia could really play a very powerful role of that of mediator. And we badly need mediators to get us through this instability as we transition to multipolarity. And Jakarta, I think, is very well placed. And your president, a military man too, understands the complicated strategic issues. So I think he could play a major role on the world stage as a mediator, and not just in Asia, but maybe elsewhere as well. I guess final word would be to caution a little bit against. I think in the West, particularly in Washington, but elsewhere too, we're I think too obsessed with the China threat. We're I think maybe a little too focused on the South China Sea as as an arena of Chinese aggression. So-called aggression. I myself am cautious there. I think we can find reasonable approaches forward, and so I would caution a little bit for Indonesia to stay involved, but preserve its neutral approach and problem-solving approach. Let's not let the South China Sea turn into a escalating militarized rivalry like we see in the Taiwan Strait. We want to avoid that. Thank you.
Thank you,
Well,
Lyle.
thank you, Professor Goldstein. Of course, we all wish for the best for it, right? Yes. And then everyone, this is, I think, unfortunately, this is the end of our session. I will get back to the Pak Broto. Pak Broto, would you please to have some closing statement for us?
Yeah, thank you, Mas Yudha. I think because we are talking about Indonesian foreign policy, there must be clarity on what we actually want. So what we call as national interest? We need to really define that. And in my opinion, protection of Indonesian abroad is among those important and vital national interests. That is the first thing. I do agree that we need to establish our relationship with China but to the point that we have to be able to stay independent on our own will, basically. So I realized that economically we need China, but I'm really wish that the Indonesian government will have a cautious approach in our relation with China. So I think I will stop here, Mas Yudha. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Benny. I think I've done my job very well.
Thank you
And
very
then,
much, Mr. Yuda. I think we should take a picture before we leave. Please,
okay.
this is speaker and audience, please open up your camera. We will take a picture, right? Okay, how do we do this? Aisha, can you do this?
Yeah, sure. Okay,
Yes.
please everyone to open your camera because we are about to capture this beautiful moment tonight.
How do you get it? What is speaker? Gallery? Here?
Okay.
Sorry. I will open my camera. Okay, one more, Ati.
All right.
One more? Udah? Already?
Please everyone open your camera.
Okay.
Please open your camera, audience. Bapak Ibu sekalian tolong dibuka kameranya biar kita dapat.
All the way along, Pak Benny.
Yes.
Okay, look at my smile.
Okay. Okay, on your mark, Aisha, whatever you start taking picture and then we can. Okay.
Okay, let's take the first slide first. 1, 2, 3.
Okay. Another one.
Okay, next slide.
Okay, open your camera. Nobody want to open. Okay.
1, 2, and 3.
Okay. That's all.
Yeah, that's all.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mas Ito Wardoyo, Mr. Professor Lyle Goldstein, Professor James Yuan, and also Professor Lina Benabdallah. I think hope this is not the last discussion that we have. We look forward for your participation in the next webinar or event. Thank you very much. Bye, everybody. Bye, Lyle.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Keep in touch.
Bye-bye.
If you in Jakarta, Lyle, please let me know. Okay, bye. Mas Ito ya, terima kasih ya. Pak Yuan, Profesor Yuan. Okay, I will say.
Thank you, Benny. I see you soon.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Bye.